Okay then, so after taking the weekend off to relax a little bit, it seems the community around Battlefield 5 has been abuzz with news and information surrounding things as yet unannounced. The data miners, they've been hard at work, and Temporyal, the person behind the Firestorm details that were revealed before the trailer started coming out, has gone and released another whack ton of details about what could potentially be coming to Battlefield 5 in the future. Now today we're going to focus on a list containing more than 35 new weapons, sidearms, melee weapons and gadgets he's found, indicating DICE is really hard at work behind the scenes, building a lot of content for us to enjoy. But before we dive into this list, I do just want to say, just take it with a pinch of salt. These are just entries in the game files and there's no dates whatsoever attached to any of these items, so really they could be coming at any point in the future. Right then, let's get started with new primary weapons. First on the list is the M2 Carbine. The M2 Carbine was a select fire variation of the iconic M1A1 Carbine. US troops loved it because of its firepower, its lightweight, and its small size. Now, according to the files, this weapon is heavily linked to the upcoming Chapter 4 5v5 content that is due to arrive with new maps supporting the mode and various other things as well. We've talked about this just a little bit in my roadmap video that I released a couple of weeks ago, and since then, Temporyal has been able to uncover even more details about Chapter 4, revealing the French forces and lots of new gadgets that are specific to this 5v5 game mode, and I'm going to talk about that in a future video later this week, so stick around for that one. Next up, a rather interesting addition, the Braider Pg. This was a gas-operated rifle fed from a 20-round magazine, and it had an automatic fire mode with a 4-round burst limiter. This makes the PG the world's first burst-firing automatic rifle, and that makes me immediately excited for this one. I was always a big fan of the AN-94 in Bad Company 2, and in Battlefield 4 as well, when DICE added it. I didn't really use it in Battlefield 3 all that much, and so if you give me a burst rifle in Battlefield 5, I'm probably going to use it quite a lot. Next, some quickfire mentions. The Browning M1919 A6 30 cal machine gun is mentioned. This features a bipod and a carrying handle, so that's very likely going to be slid into the MMG category, with a rate of fire of 599 rounds per minute and a magazine capacity of a maximum of 250 rounds. This is likely going to compete directly with the MG42, but it's going to trade that rate of fire for other weapon control aspects, I think. The MG30, that's also found in the files, but it could potentially be renamed the S2-200 after a variant produced by a Swiss company called Solo Turn. Rate of fire will sit at 770 rounds a minute, with a rather small magazine capacity of just 30 rounds, and again, this will slot into the MMG category. The Masson light machine gun, last seen in Battlefield 1, is in the files, and we've mentioned this one before as well. It saw massive use right across World War I and World War II on both sides of both conflicts, and it was the world's first light machine gun to see widespread use. The Chauchard LMG, a French weapon also seen in Battlefield 1, that's present in the files, and this one, due to a bug, has been spotted and used in multiplayer by a few players already, although I think that bug has now been patched out. And the Commando Carbine, the bolt-action carbine made in Britain, is mentioned as well. This is set to be released later on in Chapter 3 as a weapon through the Tides of War for the Medic class, which is a really interesting addition. Next, we're going to move on to some SMGs for the Medic class, and first on the list is an Italian weapon. This is the MAB-38. Now, it was issued to the Royal Italian Army in 1938, and it was used throughout World War II by the Italians, and a few variants were used by other countries as well, Germany, Romania, and the Argentinian Army of all people. Depending on which of the variants DICE decides to base this entry on, the rate of fire will sit around the 600 rounds per minute mark, and it could feature either a 10, 20, 30, or 40 round box magazine. The Sterling, the Wellgun, and the Lanchester, they are mentioned again in the files, although I've mentioned them several times in previous videos, but at the moment there's no information as to when DICE plans to release these. The Karabin 1938M, a Polish weapon, is mentioned in the files. This was a prototype semi-automatic rifle used by the Polish during their invasion in 1939. I know Polish players of Battlefield 5 really wanted to see their country represented with different player models and potentially even maps as well, but this might give them something to cheer about. The Model 37 shotgun, that's supposedly coming to Battlefield 5 soon as well. The in-game description describes it as a tactical shotgun with an alternate fire mode that loads a slug round into the chamber in front of the standard buckshot rounds, which is quite interesting. The other shotgun in the game at the moment that can fire a different type of round is, of course, the M30 drilling. You can switch between buckshot and a rifle barrel on that gun. And the last primary weapon mentioned is the Sjogren shotgun, again seen in Battlefield 1, but the data suggests that this weapon, like the M2 carbine, is somewhat linked to the 5v5 mode coming in Chapter 4. Okay then, several new primary weapons on the way, but what about sidearms? The files do contain some references to those as well. The Wellrod pistol is mentioned, a British sidearm developed to be as quiet as humanly possible. It'll feature a 6-round magazine capacity, and it could well be linked to that Chapter 4 5v5 mode. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be making a video later on this week on Chapter 4 content, so really do look out for that. I'm mentioning it quite a few times, and there is a lot to talk about there. The Model 27 revolver, better known as the Smith & Wesson Model 27, is the original 357 Magnum revolver, and it's mentioned in the Battlefield 5 files. First produced in 1935, it's still produced today in many different variants. Now, according to the in-game files, it will fire slower than the current auto revolver that's already in Battlefield 5, but it will be capable of dealing much greater damage. Now, the revolver in Battlefield 5 is already very good, so adding another one that's even better when it comes to damage, I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to need to see how DICE balance that one. And the Walther PPK is mentioned. This is James Bond's signature handgun. Both a standard and a suppressed variant of the gun is mentioned in the files, which is quite interesting, I have to admit. Right then, moving on to gadgets now, an area in Battlefield 5 that I think is currently lacking in options, so it's good to see some mentions here. Firstly, the Panzerbuchse 39, I think that's how you pronounce it. This is a German anti-tank rifle, and it's somewhat reminiscent of the Tankgewehr rifle that we saw in Battlefield 1. That was part of the Tank Hunter Elite class pickup. This rifle holds 3 rounds at a time, and was in use from the invasion of Poland right through to 1944 by the German army, by which point it had become almost hopeless at penetrating armour since opposing forces had really stepped up their protection. This to me feels like an assault class gadget, although that's not mentioned in the files. It's just the gadget is there and no class is really linked to it yet. The Boys anti-tank rifle is also mentioned, and this is likely going to be a direct competitor to the Panzerbuchse 39, but available for the allied factions in the game. Next, we have a rather cool-looking addition. This is the Goliath Mine. It's a remote-controlled explosive device which could be operated from a distance in order to protect the operator from the explosion. It's like a World War II remote-controlled car, but it's packed full of explosives. If this comes to the game, I'm equipping this thing right away and trying it out. It looks oddly funny, in my opinion. The RMN 50 frag launcher is on the list as well. This is essentially a portable mortar firer, and it fires mortar rounds from a makeshift Mosin Nagant rifle. Now, according to the files, this gadget is linked again to the Chapter 4 5v5 mode, but it could well come to the base game. The Japanese Type 89 knee mortar, widely used by the Japanese in the Pacific Theatre during World War II, that's included in the files, further adding emphasis to the theory that Chapter 5 will indeed introduce the Americans and the Japanese into the game. The M1A1 bazooka and the Panzerschreck are listed, obviously being direct competitors, but again, that brings the American faction into view for Battlefield 5. And lastly, a strange one, the buff syringe. According to the in-game description, this will buff teammates' abilities for a while once you stab them with it. so it's kind of like a stimulant, I guess. Maybe this could be something for Firestorm in the future, where you can sort of stimulate yourself to run a little bit faster or gain health a little bit quicker, I'm not sure, but if you were to add that to the main game of Battlefield 5, that sounds a little bit weird. I'm not sure what to make of that one. And lastly for the weapons, I'm going to list off a bunch of new melee options, so get ready. The Fairburn Sykes Fighting Knife, the Leather Pipe, the EGW Survival Knife, the Fallschirmjäger Switchblade, the M2 Paratrooper Switchblade, the Sabre, the French Nail, the US Trench Knife, the Arditi Dagger, the Scout Knife, the Russian Combat Knife, the Folding Shovel, the Barbed Wire Baseball Bat, the French Hunting Knife, the Quartermaster Knife, the Machete, the Fire Iron, the Escape Axe, the Scythe, and the Mountain Axe. Yeah, that's quite a lot of them. And also mentioned are some map-specific melee weapons like bottles and burned planks. These will likely operate similarly to the broken bottles in the Apocalypse DLC for Battlefield 1 and the icicles that you could find in Battlefield 4. Now, obviously, as I said at the start of this video, you'd be best taking all of this with a pinch of salt. Right now, all this information has been taken from the game files, and whilst its presence might be good enough for some people to say that this is just coming to the game, until we hear from EA and DICE about their inclusion, we can't count anything as official confirmation. There's no release dates attached to any of this either, but with a few mentions of Japanese and American weapons and gadgets making their way into the files, I think that adds more weight to Chapter 5, which is currently greyed out on the roadmap, that it will indeed be the Pacific Theatre. We know it's going to introduce a new theatre of war, and with either the Pacific or the Eastern Front being open for exploration, I'm now firmly hedging my bets with the Pacific. But there we are, that's all we've got for today. Later on this week, I will be making a video on the Chapter 4 5v5 mode and everything that seems to be linked to that at the moment, so stay tuned for that. And another video separate from this one that's going to focus on different vehicles found in the files as well, because even more stuff has been found apparently. If you want to read Tempoyal's Reddit posts, I've linked his profile down below in the description, so you can go and check him out and all of that information. Make sure you leave your comments down below in the comments section, and drop this video a like if you enjoyed it. But until next time, my name is Westie, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.